alaikum wa rahmatullah. This is IELTS with Shaiban. This part today, which is episode 2, task 1, showing how to write an introduction, body and conclusion for task 1. And most importantly, today we are going to talk about something called writing band descriptors. This band descriptors shows the candidate the needed criteria to achieve the band score. For example, if you want to achieve band 6, there are certain elements should be required for band 6, band 7, band 8, and so on. Good luck. All right, everybody. As we can see here in front of you, we have something called the Writing Task 1 Band Descriptors Public Version. Any IELTS candidate should have some information about what this is supposed to mean. This is the criteria of marking of IELTS Task 1. And as you can see here, we have 4 criteria that examiners judge the students, and accordingly they give their mark. The first criteria is called task achievement, and in this way, that means to what extent the candidate achieves his task. Also, we have coherence and cohesion, means understanding and linking. That means, is the passage clear, and is the linking or the linking technique is good, or linking techniques are really used very well. Then we have 2 issues which concern language. The first one is called lexical resource. That means the type of vocab needed for this kind of questions, and also grammatical range and accuracy, the kind of grammar which is used in writing. I'm going to talk in detail about these issues, and of course each candidate should know how to go through the exam by knowing his level and knowing the things that he or she should cover or tackle to overcome the difficulties to achieve the band score needed for examination, maybe to be registered at university, or maybe to be accepted for the visa. Now let's look at the graph in front of you, and as you can see here, we have the task achievement, coherence, cohesion, lexical resource, grammatical range, and accuracy. I like to focus on the band 6 in here. Band 6, as you can see here. So this is band 6, and band 7. So this is a 6, this is a 7, and this is 8, and this is 9. For task achievement, the techniques I'm using in my classes, I try to push the students to the limit. That means I like to make you, for example, for task achievement, fully satisfies all the requirements of the task. And we are going to talk in detail what does it mean fully satisfies. And also clearly presents fully developed responses. But if we go to band 6, for example, we say addresses the requirements of the task. That means you have to present an overview with information appropriately selected. That means you have, when you start your writing, you have to give an overview. I'm going to talk about that in detail in a minute. What does it mean and how to achieve it? Of course, for coherence and cohesion, you have, if you go to band 9, uses cohesion in such way that it attracts no attention. That means it's very easy, and it's easy to follow, and very well developed. Your article or your piece of essay is very well developed and not necessarily to be complicated. And you have to keep in mind, complicated tasks are not really a good thing to do, or to complicate your writing is not a really good thing to do in the exam. Then paragraphing, that means we should see very well managed paragraphs. That means an introduction paragraph, body paragraph, then conclusion paragraph. For lexical resources, that means the vocabulary, I recommend the charts I gave, the tables I gave in the last episode, talking about the types of languages needed for IELTS Task 1. I mean here language of change, language of comparison, language of cycles, and language of processes, and all of these, tables are mentioned in the first episode of Task 1. Finally, and the last point, which is rather crucial, which is the grammar range and accuracy. If you go to Band 7 in here, if you look at Band 7, if you are willing actually to have Band 7, you have to cover these points. Variety of complex structures are needed, and variety means you have to use concessional sentences, you have to use relative clauses, you have to use participles, you have to use future tenses, for instance, in a very accurate way to show your ability of the advanced level of grammar. And this issue of grammar thing and grammar and vocabulary techniques will be, inshallah, explained in the next few episodes. And I'm going to make one episode how to study by self-study and how to develop your skills, inshallah. And of course, as you can see, in Band 7 has a good control of grammar and punctuation, but there might be some errors. By the way, even Band 9, even if you Band 9, if you look at Band 9 grammar, it contains some slips. So Band 9 doesn't mean necessarily to be 100% error-free. Even little mistakes will, as long as these mistakes do not impede the meaning, that means it do not, give a wrong meaning or affect the meaning negatively, they are okay. Now you have in front of you Task 1 question, and you can see the question here. If you look at this graph, you can see here, this is the question. So this graph illustrates the number of Chinese and Indian students who enrolled at Northern University over a 5-year period. The first stage here, we have 2 points to be written in the introduction. The first thing is, you have to rephrase the question. I mean by rephrasing, you have to change some of the words. For example, we don't say this graph, we say this, for example, this diagram. So you change the word graph to diagram. Illustrates, you can say demonstrates. So you can change also the word here. And the number of Chinese, Japanese, and Indian students, you can say students from China, Japan, and India who enrolled at Northern University. For example, if you don't know the meaning of the word enrolled, you can keep it as it is. Or you can say who got listed. So if you don't know the meaning, just keep it and don't even change it. Over a 5-year period, there is a very nice, technique here. You can say, for example, if you look at the chart in here, we have over a 5-year period. So you can see 1999, 2003. So you can say this diagram demonstrates the number of students from China, Japan, and India who enrolled at Northern University from 1999 here to 2003. So in this way, you can see, you can change it. Why rephrasing? Because rephrasing is very important in IELTS. Because if you copy paste, this is like stealing, and this is called plagiarization. That means plagiarism is prohibited in IELTS. You cannot copy paste. If you copy and paste, the examiner is going to cut off the number of words of the question. So this question is more than 20 words. That means you are going to lose more than 20 words of your writing, which is really a bad thing that can happen to you in the exam. So my advice, or the best thing, or the correct thing, you have to rephrase the question, and in this way you have maybe more than 20 words in your account. The second stage here, you have to give what is called the general overview. And the general overview, I want to say something about the general overview. The general overview represents a summary to the graph or the diagram with something specific. So it's not just a summary, it's a summary with something special that has been happened, or something you can give a significant, talk about the significant changes throughout the period. I mean from 1999 to 2003. To get band 6 and more in IELTS, if you go to the band descriptors, the previous page, the band descriptors, by the way, you can download the band descriptors from the internet. If you go to band 6 for task achievement and band 6, 7 and more, task achievement is highly required. And I'm going maybe to mention that later, inshallah. So, first, you have to rephrase the question. That means to change some words, let's say 5, 6, or 7 words. Then you have to give the general overview of the task. General overview means you have to tell me what happened during that period. It's a summary plus extra information. So if, for example, if you ask what do you mean by a summary, if you look at this graph here, the summary here can show that we have 2 changes happened in here mainly, which is the increasing of both of, we say, China and India, while you can see a decline of the numbers of students from Japan. That's a summary. The overview, you have to show me what are the main issues happened, or how to describe this summary in more detail. The next graph will show you what does this mean. You can see here in front of you, this extract is about showing the previous question, and it shows you, for example, how we say rephrased the question. Then he gave the general overview. The diagram shows the enrollment of Chinese, Japanese, and Indian students at Northern University from 1999 to 2003. This is, as you can see, the diagram. The writer used the diagram, shows, so he changed some of the words. Chinese, Japanese, Indian students at Northern University from 1999 to 2003. And this is, we can say this is a good rephrasing. Then, what comes next is the general overview. Look carefully here, and you can see, if you remember, I said the summary, in the summary, both of India and China, or Indian Chinese students, numbers increased, while Japanese fell substantially. So, look at the overview. During this period, enrollment of both Chinese and Indian students, he gave us the type of increase. He didn't just say increased, but he said numbers of Indian and Chinese students more than trebled. That means he's giving us the type of increase which is a big increase, which is 3 times. However, Japanese admissions fell substantially first. So he said substantially, that means he's showing us the big change that happened to Japanese students. Then he gave us a figure with numbers being almost the reverse of those of Chinese students. So numbers almost the opposite of those Chinese students. As you can see here in the overview, we try to avoid numbers, direct numbers. We don't say 5%, 20%, 7 days, 5 hours. No, we try to avoid numbers, but we have to have an equivalent language showing the big changes: substantial, remarkable, significant, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, double, triple. So that this is the language which is appropriate for the overview. Now we have an example of, let's say, a summary. Now if you can see here the summarizing sentence, which is about the same graph concerning the Japanese, Indian, and Chinese students. You can see here, overall, the graph highlights a considerable difference between growth in Chinese and Indian enrollments, but reduction in Japanese enrollments. So considerable difference. So the first thing is considerable difference between growth in Chinese, but reduction in Japanese. As you can see here, just a general information, no double, no 2 times, no 3 times. So just a considerable growth of both of China and India, and a reduction in Japanese. And in this way, they are different. So just to remind you, as you can see in front of you, we have here the candidate or the student. We say he rephrased the question. So that means he rephrased the question. That means he changed some of the words. And then finally, he gave here the general overview, and that covered all, we say, the necessary information with some detail. He said enrollment of both Chinese and Indian students more than tripled. So that means a big increase, more than 3 times. So this is not just an increase. However, Japanese admissions fell substantially. So that means he's showing the language of change. It's a big change. And using a participle structure here, being almost the reverse of those for Chinese students. And this is a very nice way of expressing what happened to Japanese students. Now, my dear students, as you can see in front of you, this is the body 1, or the main, we say, the main paragraph talks about what happened, or the language of change, and the main changes happened to the graph concerning the students from Japan, China, and India. As you can see here, this is paragraph 2. We have Chinese numbers. You have to show me here language of change. I recommend using the graph from the language of change, which is the language of change concerning the first table I talked about in this episode, in episode 1, or task 1, episode 1. And that shows the table, the changes. So Chinese numbers, I want you to show me language of change. Up to 2002, followed by then something. Again, you have to show me language of change. Reaching almost 100 students, you have to give me a year in here. Similarly, numbers of Indian students showed, then something. Then you have to continue showing the language of change to the end of the graph. Now I'll show you a model answer to this graph. As you can see here, now we have the graph with the model answer. The Chinese numbers grew steadily because it is past tense from 1999 to 2003. So that means you have to use past tenses, and this is extremely important. Now, because you are not describing, it's not an introduction, but you are going actually to describe what has already happened, or what happened in the past. So grew steadily. Yes, that means kind of change, which is not a big change. Up to 2002, followed by, so we have a big change in here, sharp rise, reaching almost 100 students. Just I want to add something in here. Many students, when they write task 1, yes, they show sharp rise, significant change, but you forget to support your essay with data, and this is extremely important. As I can see here, you have to give me the number of students, which is here 100. So it's a must. Then in 2003. Similarly, numbers of Indian students showed a steady growth. So what does it mean steady? You have to explain it with numbers. Throughout the period from about 10 to over 17, 2003. So that was 1999, 2000, 2002, 2003. So that's a steady growth from 10 to 70. In contrast, enrollments of Japanese students, of course, Japanese students declined significantly, as you have seen in the graph. So we have decreased from a high, which is a big change, a peak of over 100 students in 1999 to just over 40 in 2001. Numbers then, of course, this numbers then concerning Japanese students leveled off. That means no change throughout 2002, finally dropping again to a low. So you can see here, this is a big change from a high here to a low here in 2003. A further point of interest is that from 2001 to 2003, from 2001 to 2002, enrollments from all three countries were very similar. So there's a big similarity between, we say, the three countries. The average difference being approximately 10 students. Now, before we move further, I want just to give, we say, a summary of what I have said in here concerning this body paragraph. You can see here Chinese numbers grew steadily, then he said up to 2002, followed by a sharp rise. So grew steadily, sharp rise. You have to support with, we say, examples, 100 students. This is number one. So you have to support your data with examples, number one. Number two, linking words. So you have to say on the other hand, next, and we say on the other hand, or in contrast, further point, as here a further point he's saying here of interest is that. So you have to use these linking because you cannot write without linkage. You'll never get even band 5 if you do that. So you have to use your linking, or linking, of course, linkage and how to link. This will be part of these episodes of IELTS with Shaiban, and will be explained in detail even further and in more detail in the future, inshallah. Finally, and most importantly, you have to show comparisons. Without a comparison, this is not a good written essay. So if you say, for example, here he used similarly. The word similarly, that means he is showing a similar trend to another trend. So that means. Then he said in contrast. So the opposite means he's showing the in contrast what happened to Japanese students and when they dropped. Then he said, for example, another similar. He said here further point of interest is that from 2002 to 2003, enrollments from all three countries were very similar. So again, showing some kind of similarity. That means they were very similar, and the difference was only or approximately 10 students. So you have to show a summary, and of course this summary you have to show some we say similarities between and contrast between the trends, and this showing these comparisons are extremely important if you want to achieve more than band 7. Okay, just I want to just to refresh your memory about this task. As you can see, in front of you we have this task again, and it can be seen that this task talks about the numbers of, we say, Japanese students, which is the highest. They were highest, and then dropped the decline of Japanese students, as I said previously in this, and the increase of we say all Chinese and Indian students. I want just to make a summary. Number one, you have to rephrase the questions. I mean, you have to change some of the vocabulary, some of the words, not all of them in this question, and you have to try to make it as easy as possible. As I say, 5 to 6 words will be okay. Secondly, you have to give an overview. I mean, the overview, you have to give me a summary plus something. That means the significant and remarkable changes that happen throughout the period. The last point I want to, to make, or I want you to pay attention to. Look at the question here. It says, summarize the information by selecting, reporting, main features, and make comparisons where relevant. So every task 1 question in IELTS has these things. You have to select and report, talk about main features, and make comparisons where relevant. So main means you have to show me the highest, the lowest, and of course you have to support them with data. Never forget the data. And you have to make comparisons where relevant. Okay, as we have seen previously in part 2, task 1, the episode showed you how the importance of the band descriptors and the elements mentioned in the band descriptors to show the candidate what criteria is needed for scoring the band needed in the exam. Also, we showed the techniques needed to write, we say, an appropriate introduction. Rephrasing the question and giving the general overview. Also, the body, which includes selecting the material, the most important, of course, material, and showing comparisons where relevant, and finally ending with a conclusion. I hope that you like this video, and I wish you all the best with IELTS with Shaiban. Thank you.